It was the early hours of May 14th, 2008. A quiet night in rural Minnesota, the kind of darkness where even the stars seem hesitant to shine. Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old college student, was driving home after celebrating the end of his semester with friends. He wasn't drunk, wasn't reckless. He said his goodbyes, got into his Chevy Lumina, and began the familiar journey back to his parents' house in Marshall. But Brandon never made it home. At around 1:30 a.m., he called his parents. His voice was calm but urgent. He told them he had accidentally driven his car into a ditch along a gravel road. He wasn't hurt, just frustrated. The car was stuck, and he needed a ride. His parents, Annette and Brian, got into their vehicle and headed out to find him. Brandon described his surroundings in detail. He mentioned he was near Lind, a small town just west of Marshall. He saw lights in the distance, thought it might be a nearby town or farm. But when his parents drove to where he said he was, they couldn't find him. The phone call continued. Brandon reassured them he could see the road signs, the gravel, the landmarks. He knew exactly where he was, but nothing matched. It was as if Brandon was describing a place that didn't exist, or that had somehow shifted while he stood there. Still on the phone, Brandon decided to walk toward the lights he saw, thinking it might help his parents locate him. He told them to meet him at the nearest town. They stayed on the call, guiding each other, trying to triangulate his location in the blackness of the countryside. The connection held. Their voices, mother, father, and son, linked by that thin line of hope. Minutes passed, then more. Over 47 minutes, Brandon stayed on the line, navigating the dark, keeping calm. His father later recalled that Brandon didn't seem scared, just focused, determined. And then, out of nowhere, "Oh shit." Those were the last words Brandon ever said. The phone went silent. No scream, no crash, no signs of a struggle, just those two words. And then nothing. His parents called back immediately. No answer. They kept trying, over and over again, straight to voicemail. His phone rang for a while, then stopped ringing altogether. Panic set in. At first light, they contacted the police, but the initial response was indifferent. After all, he was legally an adult. Maybe he just ran off, they said. But Brandon wasn't that kind of kid. He had plans. He had responsibilities. He had a family who knew him. And he had vanished right in the middle of a phone call with his parents. Hours later, when authorities finally began searching, they found his car. But not near Lind, not anywhere close. His vehicle was discovered nearly 25 miles away near Taunton, in a completely different direction from where Brandon had said he was. How? How could he have been so wrong about his location? The road he'd driven down was narrow, unlit, flanked by deep ditches and open farmland. There was no sign of a crash, no blood, no footprints leading far from the car. But the strangest part? Dogs brought to track his scent followed it for a short distance down the gravel road. And then, suddenly, it stopped. No trail, no scent. As if he had simply vanished into the air. And yet, the most haunting detail remains that final moment. The call between a son and his parents. A calm conversation turned cold by a sudden exclamation. A voice that seemed confident, and then silenced forever. What did Brandon see in those final seconds? What made him react like that? Was it a threat? A fall? Something else? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think happened to Brandon Swanson? As the sun rose over the quiet fields of Minnesota on May 14, 2008, Brandon Swanson had been missing for nearly 6 hours. His parents, now frantic, pleaded with local authorities to take action. But what they encountered was an all-too-familiar apathy. Brandon was 19, legally an adult, and adults, they were told, have the right to disappear. But Brandon didn't just disappear. He was talking to his parents. He asked for help. He had a clear purpose. Something was wrong. Annette and Brian Swanson knew it, and soon law enforcement began to see it too. Later that day, after extensive urging, a search team was deployed, and what they found deepened the mystery even further. Brandon's car, a green Chevy Lumina, was located near the edge of a field, not near Lind as he had described, but outside the small town of Taunton, nearly 25 miles away from where he claimed to be. It wasn't crashed or damaged. It wasn't even truly stuck in the traditional sense, just tilted slightly in a ditch, fully operable. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood. The car's doors were shut. It looked as if he had simply stepped out and walked away. But where? Tracking dogs were brought in. They picked up Brandon's scent from the car, and the trail led them along a gravel road and into a field. The scent moved steadily as if he had walked with purpose. But then, inexplicably, the trail just ended. No signs of backtracking, no split in the direction. It was as if Brandon had evaporated mid-step. And that's when the theories began to multiply. Some believed Brandon may have fallen into a hidden body of water, perhaps the nearby Yellow Medicine River. But dive teams searched every inch of the waterway. No body, no clothing, no phone, nothing. Others believed he may have died of hypothermia. After all, it was a cool spring night. But Brandon was dressed appropriately, and the weather wasn't severe enough to cause instant danger. And even if that were true, where was his body? And then there are the darker theories: abduction, foul play, or something far stranger. Some online communities have drawn parallels to cases of missing time and vanishing point phenomena, unexplained disappearances in which individuals seem to walk into a space and never walk out. Was Brandon one of them? Before we dive deeper into these chilling theories, make sure to subscribe to this channel. We explore mysterious disappearances, unsolved crimes, and the eerie corners of reality. And your support helps us uncover even more. Back to Brandon. One of the most baffling questions remained. Why did he insist he was in Lind, when in reality he was nowhere near it? Did his phone somehow malfunction? Was he disoriented? Or was he deliberately misleading someone who might have been listening? Some suggest he may have been experiencing a form of confusion, perhaps due to a minor head injury or psychological distress. But his parents firmly reject that theory. He was coherent, focused, logical. His words were clear. He was not confused. Others question whether he was being followed. Could Brandon have suspected he was in danger but didn't want to say it outright over the phone? Was the phrase, "oh shit," not one of surprise, but of realization? The terrain was also analyzed. Could he have fallen into an unmarked well, an old drainage system? Again, nothing was found. And in a flat, open area like that, such features would have been obvious to searchers. The clock kept ticking. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The hope of finding Brandon alive began to fade, but the questions only grew louder. And one of them, to this day, still echoes across forums, documentaries, and podcasts. How can someone walk along a straight road in open land while on the phone with their parents and simply disappear? We want to hear what you think. Drop your theory in the comments. Could Brandon have fallen victim to something natural, or is this case far from ordinary? With no sign of Brandon Swanson, no body, no phone, no personal items, investigators were left with one thing: the unknown. And in the vacuum of answers, 1,000 theories began to take shape. Some clung to the most logical explanation: that Brandon had somehow succumbed to the elements. He was walking in the dark, after all, through rural farmland, near rivers, fields, and possibly hidden hazards. Could he have fallen into an abandoned well? Or perhaps a sinkhole no one knew existed? Yet, extensive search efforts, repeated again and again over the years, yielded nothing. No bones, no clothing, no phone signal, and no indication that Brandon had ever entered the water or been exposed to the harshness of the land for long. The dogs had tracked him for a while, about 3 miles, and then the scent vanished. Not faded, vanished. Experts were baffled. Scents don't just disappear unless something or someone interrupts the trail. And so, the darker theories emerged. Some believe Brandon was abducted, that someone might have picked him up after he stepped away from the road. Perhaps a passerby in a truck, not uncommon in that area, saw a vulnerable young man walking alone and took advantage of the moment. But if that were true, why didn't Brandon say something during the call? Could he have noticed someone watching him and chose not to alert his parents directly? That might explain the sudden, "oh shit," before the line went dead. Maybe he realized he was no longer alone. Others believe in a more chilling possibility: he wasn't supposed to be found. Minnesota has its share of urban legends: mysterious lights in the woods, whispered tales of strange sightings, even secret tunnels dating back to the Prohibition era. Of course, none of that is concrete, but the sheer absence of anything pushes the mind into those shadowy corners. And then there's the psychological angle. Some theorists suggest Brandon may have staged his disappearance, that perhaps he wanted to vanish, start over. But this idea quickly falls apart under scrutiny. He had no history of mental illness, no signs of distress, no preparations for leaving. He was talking to his parents, asking for help, planning to meet them. That's not the behavior of someone who's trying to disappear. That's someone who wants to be found. Then there's the strange inconsistency. Brandon insisted he was near Lind, but was actually closer to Taunton, nearly 25 miles apart. Could he have been disoriented, or was he being deliberately vague? A few online theorists go deeper, into conspiracy. Was Brandon involved in something he shouldn't have been? Did he witness something that made him a target? Could this be tied to something bigger, something we're not meant to see? Sound far-fetched? Maybe. But so is a 19-year-old vanishing mid-phone call on a clear night with no trace left behind. And then there's the supernatural. Some suggest portals, alternate dimensions, even time slips. Ideas often laughed off, yet hauntingly present in cases like this. When every logical door has been opened and closed, the impossible begins to whisper louder. One eerie detail many point to: the silence after Brandon's final words. The line didn't disconnect. It stayed open. His parents called out his name over and over again, for minutes, but there was no response. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence. It's as if the world he was in simply ceased to exist. Could there be places where people slip between realities? Could Brandon have stumbled into one? Unlikely? Sure, but not more unlikely than a total disappearance in the middle of a phone call. So, what do you believe? Are we looking at a tragic accident, a crime expertly hidden, or something that defies all reason? Let us know your theory in the comments, because sometimes the only way to solve a mystery is to talk about it. More than a decade has passed since Brandon Swanson vanished into the Minnesota night. His face, once printed on missing person posters and the evening news, now lingers in the corners of forums, YouTube comments, and the memories of those who can't forget the chilling nature of his story. But for his parents, Annette and Brian, Brandon's memory isn't a mystery. It's a wound that never closes. Every year, they honor his birthday. They keep the porch light on. They still wonder if the phone will ring again, if someone, somewhere might come forward with new information. And even though the world around them continues to move, their reality remains frozen at 2:15 a.m. on that spring night in 2008, when their son said, "Oh shit," and was gone. The search has never truly stopped. Over the years, volunteers, cadaver dogs, divers, and drone teams have combed the surrounding fields, woods, and rivers. Every lead is followed. Every rumor is investigated. But there's never been a breakthrough, just miles of open land and silence. What makes Brandon's case so haunting isn't just the lack of evidence, it's the presence of communication. This wasn't a young man who wandered off silently. He was on the phone, describing things, thinking clearly, trying to be found. He was right there. And then he wasn't. In response to their own pain, Brandon's parents became advocates. They lobbied the state of Minnesota to pass what would become known as Brandon's Law, legislation requiring law enforcement to immediately begin investigating missing adults under suspicious circumstances, without waiting hours or days. Because they learned the hardest way possible that time is everything. And still, the questions echo. Why couldn't he be found that night? Why didn't the dogs track him further? Why has not a single item, not even his phone, surfaced in all these years? Some believe the land still holds the truth, that someday erosion or chance will reveal where Brandon went. Others say the answers won't be found in the ground, but in the minds of people who know more than they've admitted. And then there are those who say, maybe there are no answers. Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Maybe Brandon stepped into one of those rare cracks in reality, the kind that don't make sense, don't follow logic, and don't leave clues. But if that's true, how do we explain the call, the voice, the certainty, the fear? Maybe the most terrifying part is that we still don't know what he saw. Somewhere between the sound of gravel underfoot and the flicker of distant lights, something happened. Something that changed everything in an instant. And now, all that remains is the story. A car in a ditch, a boy on the phone, a sentence that ends in the dark. Brandon Swanson didn't die surrounded by mystery. He became one. If you're still with us, thank you for listening, for remembering Brandon, for refusing to let this story fade. And if you felt the same chill we have while unraveling this case, subscribe to the channel. We dive deep into the unexplained, the forgotten, and the hidden truths behind stories just like this one. Because sometimes it's in the quietest echoes that we hear the loudest answers. And maybe, just maybe, one day, someone will answer the question that still haunts a family, a town, and now, all of us. What happened to Brandon Swanson?